More news today, Australians are getting poorer, still getting poorer. And the Albanese government is now getting desperate, trying to find a way to look like it's doing something about it. I mean, today's inflation figures, 7%. Now, good, that's down from the 7.8% in December, so it's an improvement. But it's still way higher than the rises in wages. So you've got to ask when it's going to end. Joining me is the panel, Michael Costa, former New South Wales Labor Treasurer, and Garth Hamilton, Liberal Senator from Queensland. Michael Costa, inflation down from 7.8% to 7%. Is that a sign that we are now getting out of the woods?
I don't think so, Andrew. I think it's showing there has been some sort of impact through all the monetary policy rises through the interest rate. However, I think we've got a long way to go, and it also, to me, indicates that the Reserve Bank shouldn't have paused last month. It should have moved with a small rise. I think it's got no choice but to have a small rise, and I say that for a couple of reasons. One is that this figure has within it, embodied within it, some really concerning subcomponents. The energy prices, particularly electricity and gas, are still extraordinarily high, and they're going to feed right through the economy and into consumer goods. So I think that's a problem. But more importantly, we've got a budget position that is still expansionary. I know there's talk of the budget deficit coming down from what was projected end of last year, but it's still an expansionary budget. And if it's an expansionary budget, really that's pushing demand into the economy at the very time that the Reserve is concerned about inflation. I don't think there's much capacity, from what I've seen, from what the government's doing, that there's going to be any serious attempt to pare that back. They're very fortunate. There's been some changes in terms of trade and a few other variables that have helped them on the revenue side, but it's the expense side that they're not addressing, and that means to me that the Reserve Bank is going to have an interest rate increase. Remember, in the US, interest rates are over 5%, and we're down at 3%. So I don't think you should be complacent about this marginal decrease in the inflation rate, particularly if you know how it's actually composed.
Yep, no, good point. Garth Hamilton, see, Michael just pointed out a fact, right? It's the energy prices again that's killing us. They're just the standard, month after month, gas and oil and all that. And part of that is the fact that we've got all these global warming policies that's made energy much more expensive. And I don't see the Liberals being able to tackle that properly until they start saying to people, global warming isn't quite the threat you were told, and therefore we do not need to do all these insane things. Do you think the Liberals will ever come to that point where they'll be able to look at that argument?
Well, I think we need a much more clear position on what our intention is with energy policy, and affordability must lead that conversation, Andrew. And that's across a number of things. You're right to point out energy prices. When I talk to people out there, petrol prices are still just as high as they were. Grocery prices are hurting people terribly. And look, as a government, they're still spending proportionately higher than we were pre-pandemic. So that fuel's still being put on the fire. What people need to see is firstly, I think for the government to tighten its fiscal policy significantly, and I talked about that last time, I'll keep talking about that. That's what we need from this government. That's what this budget needs to deliver, a demonstration that the government's going to be responsible and act on it rather than just sitting around commentating on how much pain Australia's going to feel. It's time to get working on that. As an opposition, I think what we need is very strong policy that we bring to the next election that shows that affordability is at the forefront of our thinking.
Yeah, but my point really is that you won't be able to properly tackle the global warming policies that are driving energy prices so high until you start telling people, look, there's no need to panic. We don't need to do all these stupid things. And that is the only way you'll be able to tackle it. Otherwise, you're trapped into the net zero mentality.